Why do people keep putting money in the U.S.? Because it is the only market that if it goes up and you make less than that, you are losing capital.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
And we are back with another edition of the Daily Dots. We're just going to jump into this because
we've been having a heated debate for like 15 minutes before we hit.
Yeah, that was really good. And what we're talking about is, I made the comment about not liking Carney up in Canada because he reminds me of the quintessential, like, globalist technocrat. And when I say globalist, I was explaining this to Chase. I'm not like sitting in a bunker somewhere saying that, you know, these guys want us to
that word has become as weaponized as fascist, I think, in the last few years.
Well, I mean, yeah, except for the fact that nobody's like lost their job for calling somebody a globalist or being called, or you like, no, when you accuse somebody of being a globalist, they don't get uninvited from birthday parties and they don't lose their job.
Depends on where you're at.
Oh, well, okay. Are we trying to make the argument that the negative connotations culturally surrounding the word globalist are on par with fascist?
Not on par. I said it has been weaponized as much.
Okay, well, okay, that's fair. So I'm trying to speak in accurate terms. Okay, so somebody, in my opinion, the definition of a globalist is for any number of reasons, some of which can be very philosophically kind or beneficial, or meaning I think that there are a lot of people out there that could have globalist sympathies for very good reasons. Okay, I'm not assigning a good or bad value to it. I'm just using a definition of people that think part of the answer in the world is having more globalized type standards, whether it relates to environmental stuff, whether it relates.
Extra-national problems require extra-national solutions.
Yeah, well, I mean, that assumes that we agree that it's an extra-national problem. And I don't think.
You think there are no extra-national problems that require?
Of course, I didn't say that.
All right.
But as it
some
relates,
things require global solutions.
Yes.
Okay.
And well, global solutions. See, here's where I really lament the loss of cost-benefit analysis and rational thinking, because I think all too often we identify a problem. We've got to fix this. And I sit there and I go, hold on a second, guys. Sometimes the fix is worse than the problem.
100%.
Right. And so my whole thing is saying, I think a lot of this, I think a lot of these environmental rules, I think a lot of some of the aspects of some of these trade alliances that get formed, when you look at them, I'm not saying I think that they are purely nefarious. I'm not saying I think that they're even malintended. Okay. What I am saying is what I see, especially from those types of globalists. Again, the word I define by saying you believe in adhering to rules and regulations that supersede your own borders and your own legislation. And in some way, shape, or form, and again, I'm not using this in trying to be hyperbolic, but in some way, shape, or form, you are bowing at the altar of some other type of legal entity. You're agreeing to submit your economy and your government under rule that is conducted and overseen outside of your own walls. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying, you know, they've got bald cats and they're petting them and, you know, they're twisting their mustache in the dark lair. I'm saying that always concerns me, because any movement toward less individual and sovereign states freaks me out. And why does it freak me out? Because if you are governed by a government, regardless of how malevolent or whatever, I mean, good or bad, good, you know, kind, evil, mean, whatever the case may be, if you don't have the ability to opt out of said government, you're not a free human being.
Yeah, unfortunately, most people don't have the ability to opt out of whatever government they're under at the end of the day. But I think to your point.
Well, except for us in the United States. And this is one of the reasons why it concerns me to see.
But in the U.S., if you thought what was going on was horrible, there's nothing you could do about it unless you
can move
to where, though. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I could go to Australia. I could go to
If you have
Panama.
enough, if you have enough money, you can go to some of these places
Well,
or
yes,
a job.
but what I'm saying is the choice or the ability exists.
Yeah, well,
It may not be accessible.
It
to
exists
some.
on the same scale of extra national things. Like people leave extra national organizations all the time.
If you had a one world government, that would not be the case.
Well, of course, but I mean, one world government. Like, are we close to that? Or
I didn't say that I thought it was happening. I think that it'd be crazy not.
I think most people would not be arguing for a one world government.
Not out in the open, they
like
wouldn't.
you like for me. So I like decentralization and I like sovereignty too. Like, and we all give up layers of it to our city, our state, our county, or the national, some extra national stuff.
I mean, technically, the definition of government is everybody ceding some form of perceived freedom for a collective good.
And the bad thing about, hit the button so that people can see my beautiful face.
Oh yeah.
I think the bad thing about it is, like, it's hard enough to get someone at your city council to care what you think, right? But you can you can make them smell your cologne, right? If you need to. It's really hard to do that for Washington D.C. Whoever represents you might represent 5 million people or something, right? Maybe that's extreme, but
and maybe they don't do a very good job representing them anyway.
Technically, you can't represent 2 people in reality,
right?
So can you represent 1 million or 800,000 or whatever? Right. So if you seed it from that already diluted point even higher into some extra national thing, like, are we going to hold that thing accountable? No, right? But that's why you vote for people to hopefully do a decent job of doing that for you. But I do think there are some problems that are bigger than a nation state that require, like, hey, let's band together, and we have to give up some stuff from our nation so that we can collectively solve giant problems. Now, I think it's easy to disagree on how big those problems are and if they rise to the occasion. I mean, there are a lot of people now that look back and say, we never should have gotten World War II. Like, that was a mistake.
right.
And to be fair to them, like, you can make a cogent argument. Like, it had nothing to do with America. Like, we should have just let that one play out. It sounds like a European problem.
Make the argument that you think that Winston Churchill is one of the greatest villains of World War II.
You literally can.
Yeah.
Like, weird to me, kind of a fan of the guy, but you can make some of these arguments, like, and I think at the end of the day, it's more of if you think the problem is extra national and requires cooperation across different nation states, there are plenty of things worth doing that. Now, 100%. Should you police it well and have a lot of checks and balances and all that kind of stuff? Like, yes, obviously, the higher power goes up, and the more separated it becomes from regular people. Like, to me, the more guardrails it requires. And to be fair, like, we talked about NATO before we hit record. Like, this is one where I think it's a pretty good idea to collectively pool resources for defense to make sure that there are standardized equipment, standardized communications procedures, essentially to avoid a World War II kind of scenario where, like, we all have to go, like, oh, like, what kind of stuff you guys got? What kind of radios you guys got?
Right.
Ooh, ours don't work with that. And like, to avoid those kinds of things. But if you think about why NATO was set up compared to the reality of today, it's like, I don't know, when you set it up, if the reason it existed goes away, should it go away, or should it be reformed dramatically? Like, that's a perfect example where, there's nothing as temporary or nothing as permanent as a temporary government program kind of thing that extends to extra national stuff, obviously. And I think it makes sense to be careful with that, or the mission creep stuff, all that kind of stuff. But I just think there are problems that are bigger than 1 or 2 or 10 countries, and it's like, maybe we should all get together and talk about this and make a plan.
No, and there's examples of that. There's examples of that working, and that's why I would agree in the sense that there's, of course, international problems that if you attempt to deal with them yourself, you're effectively just spinning your wheels, right? I mean, it makes no sense. I'm just saying, and for the most part, I think that this is probably the way it's gone down. I'm just always very sensitive to it, but I just think anytime we do something like that, it should be done with the thought in mind of let's let's open our kimono enough to get this problem solved, but let's do so in a way that certainly not on a permanent level. We're not ceding any type of state sovereignty. And you said something earlier that I couldn't agree with more, which is in most places you live in the world, you can't leave if you don't want to. And I'm like, I know. And it's one of the beautiful things about that makes America so unique and why I like living here is I can pick up my stuff and take off anytime, right? There's nothing holding me here per se. And it is a bit conspiratorial and it sounds like an argument that comes out of somebody in a basement, but I just mean it philosophically speaking. Any type of movement and any type, that whole, if there's no hell and no heaven and no religions and, the Imagine song, it's effectively the advertisement for a one world government, right? And there are, like I said, there are rational arguments. For instance, we can sit there and play the game. If you had a one world government, you wouldn't have any wars anymore. Well, you would, they would just be civil wars. But my point being that there is protection. There is a cost of having individual state sovereignty. They're more likely to butt heads and things like that. But it's kind of that ability to hold power accountable. It's one of the reasons why I believe in the 50 state, the state setup thing. And I think that I'm not one of those static ones that believe, no, it's the federal government that should have all the power. No, it's state government. I think that should probably be a balance when done correctly, in my opinion. I think that power should kind of be swinging back and forth, probably in a constant way, right? Yeah. Certain time, kind of the pendulum swinging. I think
the 10th Amendment is in the Bill of Rights for a reason. That's what
right.
I say. The states are supposed to have pretty significant sovereignty versus the federal government.
Right. And that's, I think individual state sovereignty is one of those things that gets so often overlooked about a defender of freedom. And it's not just for the benefit of the people that live in the state. It also acts as a counterbalance and an example and a report card to the governments that do not have free states, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it makes them look worse. It's a sponsor of freedom in one way or the other, and a sponsor
the whole
of liberty.
50 laboratories thing is I've always thought awesome,
Yeah.
But if you compare now to 100, 200 years ago, like states don't get to do a whole lot compared to what they used to be able to.
No.
The federal government basically said, that's our job now. And the courts are like, yeah, it's their job now.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think
good and bad.
It is. I think it is good and bad at the point we're at right now. I think it's really hard to make an argument that it hasn't gone too far.
I think it's fair.
You know what I mean?
I can't really push back on that.
Yeah. And that's where, whether or not people agree with the Department of Education or whatever, it's one of the reasons that I was a fan of the dissolution of it. And do I recognize a risk in just replacing something like that and not having, or getting rid of something like that, and not having a replacement? Yeah, I just don't really see that being the way it works, though, because in the individual states, you've got school boards. I think that is a power and a decision making that needs to get returned back to the locality. Now, you can make an argument that wasn't the best way to go about it. I'm not an expert in that field. All I know is that I don't have any. I don't have any skin in the game in the educational system in Topeka, Kansas. But if somebody were to ask me my opinion, I think it is entirely appropriate for the folks and the school board of Topeka, Kansas to have more influence on what they teach and how they teach it than some bureaucrat sitting in Washington, D.C.
I think that's fair, barring a few just basic guideline type things. Right?
Agreed.
You can't go full nutter, in some crazy way, and you can't have ridiculously low standards that messes with the country. But other than that, I totally agree.
You can't substitute your student handbook for the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, like maybe. Well, not if you're public, right?
Not if you're public, right? Yeah. No,
or do the opposite, right? You can't have I wouldn't be cool with a school in Dearborn, Michigan, being like, we're going to teach Sharia law is like
100%.
Like the best thing ever in class today. Like, let's not.
Like, right. Yeah. No, 100%. Speaking of which, really interested. It's troubling in some ways because I feel like it exemplifies how we're so often talking past each other, like you and I just were at one point.
Yeah, we were getting at it before we rolled tape, and then we rolled tape, and we're like basically agreed on everything.
Yeah. But some of the questions involving like the separation of church and state are just baffling to me because people are like, I heard this debate the other day where they were going, how can you say America's about religious freedom when you want people to live under all these Christian laws? And he sat there and went, well, all of our laws are sort of Christian. It's called the Judeo-Christian ethic, right? It's kind of a hallmark of the West.
Or you can go back to Hammurabi. It basically all keeps coming back from the same place.
You can go back to Cyrus. I mean,
Yeah.
King Cyrus, right? I mean, this isn't like it wasn't. This was what you're calling Christian was the progression of Western thought, and Christianity had a large influence on it, but it wasn't. I mean, again,
it's older than that.
Reality. Yeah, I mean, King Cyrus put out the first known Bill of Human Rights, right?
Yeah, don't kill people was not invented on Mount Sinai, as it turns out.
Right. So, but the whole religious freedom argument in this country is just kind of mind blowing to me because I'm like, okay, guys, okay, we can say in God we trust on the currency because. And that is not a violation of church and state. The state is not sponsoring you, punishing you, benefiting you in any way, shape, or form by being a member of one religion. But it doesn't mean, and I heard a Joe Rogan argument the other day where he was saying, I don't feel comfortable having 10 commandments in the public schools. In my opinion, I'm sitting there going, how in the hell are you going to teach the legal system accurately without, and the history of our country without the 10 commandments? I don't teach them as a religious instrument and don't tell people they're going to hell if they don't follow them.
Right.
But for God's sakes, you like the 10 commandments.
They're actually not controversial if you read them.
No, they underlie all Western law. I mean, it's just a fact. And to not report that. And again, one of the things that I think is interesting is look at the genesis of the 10 commandments. They were basically a code of cultural decency that a lot of other places adopted similar ones at the same time. You know, like we said,
and they were way older than Judaism. So
yeah, it's anyway. That was a random head scratcher. Moving on to markets. Hold
on, real quick.
Yeah.
You said in God We Trust made me think of. I used to work with a reconnaissance squadron, so spy planes, and their slogan was "In God We Trust, all others we monitor."
What planes were they flying? Do you know?
U-2s.
Oh, okay. Did they have any? They didn't have any SR-71s in service when you were still.
Not technically. I think
the U-2 took over all that role, didn't it?
Yeah, I want to say the CIA actually still maybe kind of operates one or two Blackbirds or something, but the Air Force doesn't.
Funny story, or maybe not funny, interesting. I was talking to a mechanic that worked on SR-71s. This is years and years ago. I can't remember where I was even, but he said something. Yeah, except when they're sitting on the tarmac, they leak like a sieve. Do you ever hear about this?
The panels have gaps in them because whenever they get flying really high and hot,
they expand.
It like tightens it up.
Yeah, so that thing would be leaking fuel on the tarmac as they're getting, and then you're about ready to fire up a jet engine. I mean, they knew what they were doing; it was safe. But they literally made that thing to be able to expand because it was flying so high and so hot.
Yep.
And that thing was released like in '68.
Yeah, it was way back.
And the public wasn't made aware of it until like the 80s.
Yeah, CIA ran it for years before it got transferred to the Air Force.
Yeah, that was wild. Anyway, two markets.
But
eventually,
that same squadron that had that slogan, I do think they flew them back in the day. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's wild.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ.
Okay, to markets. We had a celebratory day. I'm not really sure why, because it was time for one, I suppose. It was interesting, though. I didn't get a chance to read them because I've been in and out of meetings and on calls all day. But one of our biggest positions, Google, had a nice day, and it seemed to have they had to put out some announcement on quantum computing.
Yeah, that wasn't today, though, so I don't know why. They had two pieces of good news and one piece of bad news this week. And the good news was, their Willow quantum chip, some breakthrough there that's going to help make quantum a little more real. I don't know. And then the other one was they did a deal for Google Cloud, essentially a giant cloud deal with one of the big AI model shops. And then let's see, what was the bad news? There was something that wasn't good for them. I can't remember what that was now. The market, because they got hit like 5% intraday on like Monday or Tuesday. And then kind of like next thing you knew, no one cared again. But I can't remember what it was now.
Well, I'm glad you really looked into that thoroughly.
Well, I did, but
I know, but you're not looking at anything else. I mean, I don't understand how you forget it.
Yeah,
I'm joking. How did aluminum look today?
So Century did well today. Alcoa, basically Alcoa went up and started to challenge a big downtrend line in the 200 week, and we ended up below the downtrend line, but like right at the 200 week. Let me pull up and see exactly what the futures did. Last I saw, they were pretty flat. Yeah, the futures were up a little bit, but still holding that breakout. Alcoa was down like 2-ish%, and then Century was up about 3%. And the two Hong Kong China producers last night were up like 4 or 5%. So still going well. Early days, probably gonna be a lot of volatility along the way, but to hold the breakout on the actual aluminum chart for this week, to me, that was kind of the main story.
Yeah. And then as for the markets, S&P finished up 0.8. I think the NASDAQ was up 1.1. Chinese equities had a really nice rally too.
Depending, yeah. The tech stuff did well. Yeah, we were up 0.8, basically 0.8 on the S&P, up over 1, a little over 1 on the Qs. But equal weight was lame. It was up less than 0.3, which is interesting because a lot of times equal weight and small caps will look similar, but the small caps had a really good day, but equal weight was not. Mag 7 was only up 0.76, not really that great. XUS up 0.43, dollar flat again. Oil retreated a little bit. Gold down a little bit more. Gold's kind of interesting because just zoomed in on like a daily, there's like a really steep uptrend line, and we have now tested that basically 4 days in a row, and it's just barely hanging on to that.
Yeah,
feels like a cliff, honestly. And then vol naturally down another 1.5. You're at like 18.6.
A chart you pulled up the other day that looked really interesting to me was EEM versus the S&P 500. Yeah, let's talk about that one for a second. How EEM do today? I didn't even see.
Same. Let me pull up that ratio chart.
Yeah,
I doubt it kept up today.
No, it was a little bit behind the S&P. It was up 0.66. But
still on the monthly, you still looks like you could close at what would be, I don't know, maybe a generational break higher for that ratio.
And I mean, you're talking about it looking like it is breaking a downtrend that's been 17 years in the making or something like that.
Yeah, and EEM itself is actually a really old thing, and it's like basically where it was like 25 years ago or something.
Yeah.
So like,
which is unbelievable when you think about the stuff that's inside of that and how undervalued a lot of that stuff is. I mean, it really is nuts. And that's one of the bizarre things about this market is and we've talked about it for so long. You just keep seeing the signs of it, right? There's like undeniable like value. There's undeniable long-term buys where I think in a not too distant future, people are going to be like, you didn't do that? You know what I mean? That's my hope, because that's the stuff we're interested in. But I just don't see how it's not that case, right? I mean, unless you believe that U.S. markets are going to become 90% of global market cap and everything else is just going to go to zero, I don't know how you're not. The inflows into the United States continue to blow my mind. They continue to blow my mind.
You have to make the bet that despite the rest of the world putting way more money in the U.S. than we've put elsewhere, like you're also betting that continues apace. Like we talked about this in the office yesterday, but not on the show. But like, if you look at least the tick data for like the net flows in and out of the U.S. for like portfolio assets, and even if you go back to Liberation Month when the markets got killed, it was actually a really small outflow. So it just makes you wonder, like it, and then immediately giant inflows again, right? So it just makes you wonder, like if we actually had sustained and large, heaven forbid, disorderly outflows, like what in the world happens to our market?
It ain't good.
Nothing good. Yeah, it's nothing good. And the net international investment position of the U.S. is just, it's just skyrocketed to negative, like shocking numbers, and really in the last like 5 years. So the rest of the world's all in on investing here.
And I think I honestly believe look, is part of that because U.S. markets are attractive? Of course. Like I'm not saying that's not the case, but I just think the biggest, I just think the biggest part of it is the Why do people keep putting money in the US? Because it is the only market that if it goes up and you make less than that, you are losing capital. Period. End of story.
Right. And like the retail,
is it the riskiest thing to be long? Yes. It's also the riskiest thing to not be long.
right? The retail kid YOLOing in the basement, like you think like the pension fund manager in Northern Europe or whatever is obviously not going to fall for the same, stuff that the kid in the basement does. But the reality is they performance chase too. Like it's really worked for a while. The currency has let you do it without hedging. If anything, you won on the currency and on whatever bet you made on our financial markets. We had all of the cash flow, we had all of the earnings growth, like,
and you've seen things like Bitcoin go to 125,000. And I cannot dismiss that. You've also seen companies like Tesla go to 1.5 trillion, right? None of those things have come close to producing the results or being anywhere near as impactful as people thought outside of their price appreciation, right? And so it was kind of like, I'm always reminded of this episode I did years back on the radio called The Amazoning Effect, and saying how I thought the success of Amazon was going to lead to, and at the time I thought the markets were expensive. A lot of people were out there saying how expensive the markets were at that time. And my thought was, hey guys, this could make them a lot crazier, because what Amazon has done now is they've proven a case that you can be a ridiculously overpriced retail type stock that actually does end up living up to the hype. And I was like, now I think the mistake is going to be, the reason we're talking about Amazon is because it's Amazon, right? Not everybody that pursues, and as a matter of fact, the vast majority of companies that try to pursue that path, they can say we're the next Amazon. Nobody's going to be the next Amazon, or very few will get to that level, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, we just had it happen again with Nvidia, where their earnings grew so much that it didn't matter how nutty the valuation was at some point in 22 or 23 or whatever. Like, no, it was worth it.
Yep. At least in the short
term.
Keep
stacking wins on unicorns like that. Like, yeah, as an investor, you're probably going to feel pretty invincible, right?
Yeah. It reminds me of that joke, and it's one of your favorites, where that could never happen. Well, not with that attitude, it can't. You got to believe, man.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, to me, now AI may end up, printing trillions of dollars, right? But
I think eventually it will.
But what I do know is so many of our best companies that have all the earnings are the ones staking all those earnings, all that cash flow. And it's just like, okay, that we can point to the flows and be like, well, that's comical and that can reverse. But like I do give credit to people that also say, yeah, but look at the earnings, because our earnings growth compared to Europe's earnings growth, compared to Asia's earnings growth, yeah, we've dominated the world in earnings growth. But now all of a sudden, the key players that made all that money are like, cool, like let's bet it all on black.
Well, it's also not
you better not hit red.
It's also not an earnings ratio. It's a price to earnings ratio.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, you can
that didn't go down when the earnings went up. Yeah.
Right. And that to me is like I said,
all we're really talking about is extrapolation, and the human brain loves it and it does it, and it usually doesn't work forever, right?
No. Well, it never has.
Trees don't go to the sky.
Never has. That being said,
unless they're Mag 7.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I remember looking at a client probably back in 2015, somewhere around there. And they're like, Zach, what do you, and I go, listen, this cycle ain't taking the Dow to 40,000. Here we are. All right. So I will never, ever, ever again underestimate the animal spirits, and I'll also never, and I'll never get it.
Printing a few trillies helped along the way.
Oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah, printing some trees. Yeah, no kidding, printing some trees. But no, I will never be comfortable in environments like this. It's just not the way my brain works. I'm a risk first guy, and when I see people throwing caution to the wind and throwing bets around, that's usually when I'm grabbing my stack. And it's always too early. It's always too early. Yeah. The beautiful thing I will say about
I got worried about gold miners like a month early. So
yep. But that's the other thing I found is when you're doing this the right way over the long run, you're always early. It's never a maximization type deal. So anyway, You got anything else over the weekend? I mean, right now the thing. Okay,
a couple big things. Obviously, we have the
China and U.S.
The China-U.S.
That's
talks,
what I'm focused on.
which was weirdly like I didn't see anything about how that's going so far today. And I honestly, I just have no read on that. Like it's just hard to know. But the other thing is maybe interesting to some people. We do have the election in Argentina, which we'll find out. You know, if Milei is kind of on his own and without any legislative help, or if the midterm goes better than the Buenos Aires election, and you know, like, all right, kind of stabilizing there. Not that it's a big deal for the U.S. economy or anything like that. It's not. Although I guess if he gets completely squashed, maybe the U.S. stops, you know, printing pesos for them, you know, buying up pesos. But so that would just be interesting to see. And in that region, I'll also say, like, as far as watching for the weekend, I wouldn't be shocked if there was big news in Venezuela with the way that's heading. More big news came out today with Colombia. So the U.S. LATAM relationship, however you want to call it, like is gotten real interesting real fast in the month of October, I think. So that bears watching, just moving forward in general. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if we had fireworks this weekend.
Yeah, well, definitely something to keep an eye out for, especially that China and U.S. stuff. I have no feel or read.
Care about, right?
Yeah, and I just have no feel or read. I feel like
it. So what I will say is, I feel like for 6 months it was obviously getting better and better and better, and then all of a sudden we flipped the switch and it's been getting worse and worse. But now it's like, well, they're still meeting, they're talking.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong. I just don't see any off ramps.
It does. It feels like both sides have dug in a little more than we got used to there for that 6 months of it getting better.
The thing that scares me is not so much that they've dug in. They have. I'm not disagreeing with you, and I know you're keeping a tighter eye on it than I am. My concern is I look at both sides and I don't see either side having a real urgency to capitulate in any way. I mean, politically, I think the U.S. has the stronger overall hand. I've said that, but I don't think it's
I
stronger.
strongly disagree on that. But.
Well, in theory or practice. So my thing is, in theory, I think the U.S. has a stronger hand. I think they have more levers to pull. In practice, I don't think they do because of the whole political situation, right? It's like we've got a bigger gun. We're just not allowed to use it.
And it just, when one side is an industrial powerhouse and one side is a financial powerhouse, to me, real stuff matters more than money. But to your point too, though, like, you know,
well, real stuff makes money.
They can take pain. They're not going to have an election soon, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, you can't print rare earths. You can't print, you know, a lot of the things we need. So that's where it gets tough. But that's not to say costless if we pulled bigger levers than we have. Like we could, you know, we could put huge costs on each other. Dramatic costs.
No, like I said, I think that we could win a trade war, but but we can't.
Yeah.
Like, do we have the leverage? Yes, but we don't have the political will.
Yeah. It's just like a, you know, the gun that turns around and points back at yourself.
Right.
So it's just.
Yep. Yeah. Unless you're going to use it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it just like there's not the political will. The American people won't put up with it. Like it's not viable. And
I think our demands are probably going to keep coming down. Like, I think we're getting to the point where it's like, if you guys just buy some soybeans and give us the rare earths and stuff, like what do you need? And we'll probably do it.
Yeah. It's probably.
I think at the end of the day, what both sides are going to end up doing is all these little things where we ramp things up, we both basically just take them back down. And that all so far since the election, that's basically been the whole thing, is like, we do some stuff and then they do some stuff. And then we're like, should we undo all the stuff we both did? And we do that. And then we just start over. Like, we start putting stuff on and they start putting stuff on. And so, like, let's meet and take all this stuff back down that we just put. Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? But at some point, maybe one side's like, you know what? No, I don't want to play this game anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Anyway, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. As always, you can find us on social media, on Twitter, at KYR Radio for me, at Pinecone Macro for Chase. We'll be back again Monday. Until then, have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you then. You're listening to Know Your Risk Podcast. Download and subscribe at knowyourriskpodcast.com.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.